The Miami Dolphins are off to the Windy City, and it's time to look at some matchup opportunities between joint practice and preseason game to watch between Miami and Chicago.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. You're on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins, we're taking a look at some matchups on either side of the ball, some player personnel opportunities to evaluate Dolphins players against Chicago players that I think could offer some really good value and insight amidst the Dolphins trying to do everything to this point in the preseason, butting heads against their own team, right? You get an external evaluation, get a new set of skill sets to battle against. And Miami has practice today, not with Chicago, but in Chicago. And then they have joint practice with Chicago tomorrow. And then they're off on Saturday. Then they have the preseason game on Sunday, 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock kickoff. We're back. We're like 72 hours away. So I'm fired up for that. But I want to look at what Chicago has with a full acknowledgement that we don't know who's playing in the preseason game. As far as Miami's perspective, Mike McDaniel will probably disclose that tomorrow morning. Chicago's perspective, injuries. I know the tight end from Chicago, had an injury scare on Tuesday. Sounds like he avoided anything major, but like you don't really know where those guys are at. We don't know where guys like Tyreek Hill are at, right? So the full picture is a little challenging as far as everybody has a bunch of different balls up in the air at the same time. But I want to look at Chicago's depth chart and look at talent that they have allocated and who amongst that talent I think could be the best litmus tests for the Dolphins in this two exposures between a practice and a preseason game, in which if you're not going to sit all the starters for practice, right? Like at the very least, if you're healthy and able to participate, we'll get at least one butting of the heads. So let's start with Chicago's offense versus Miami's defense. And I think you look at some of the young pass catchers that exist here. Colston Loveland, the first-round tight end, big times flex weapon. This is the linebacker safety improvements that we perceive the Dolphins to have. Hey, here's a bona fide stud, and he's a young guy. He's a rookie. He's never played an NFL snap before, so full concessions there. I understand that. But it's a little different than trying to cover Julian Hill and Pharaoh Brown. And I guess Tanner Conner to some degree gives you some of the same athletic profile as a former wide receiver, but Loveland's been used in this role a lot longer. I think that's a great opportunity for what we perceive to be the strength of this Dolphins defense. How do you match guys like Colston Loveland? Well, we get a chance to find out. I think that's a great place to start. In addition to on the perimeter, DJ Moore has been a really good receiver for a long time. Now he's a little bit more late stage. I think it would probably be fair to classify that he is teetering on the brink of the prime, where he's 28 years old. He's got 8 years of league experience. I don't think he's necessarily as explosive as he once was, but he's continued to develop as a player. He should be energized with a new offensive system in place here. Rome Odunze, a first-round pick in 24. That's a height, weight, speed potential type of player. I think those two guys and their route running capabilities is where the Dolphins corners, with the room that they have, those guys playing man coverage against DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, I think you're going to have to be physical with them. And how effectively can you press them and disrupt them inside the contact window to stay sticky? Because I think if you lose inside 5 yards and if you play off, I don't know that you really have the guys that can trigger and really plaster from playing off and playing in space. So those individual pass catchers stand out a good bit to me. But really, it's this offensive line with the infusion of 3 veteran players plus a second-round draft choice at offensive tackle, where Ozzie Trapilo has been getting some runs with the ones. I would say Ozzie playing left tackle after being a right tackle at Boston College. I have high expectations for the Dolphins to stress Ozzie Trapilo. I would be disappointed if we come out of whatever reps that the Dolphins collect against Trapilo with the Jalen Phillips of the world and the Bradley Chubbs of the world and the Chop Robinsons of the world. And if you told me Trapilo got the best of them, I would be disappointed because he's not the longest player. He's switching sides. He's having to learn how to play on the left side after being a right side player. That transition can be tough. So that's a matchup I have soft circled where I look at Loveland, and I think the Dolphins can match that one pretty well with their rejuvenated backer room and their safety room, even with some of the hits and dings and bumps and bruises that group's dealing with right now. I think Chicago has a pretty decided advantage in isolation. Like when you play team, how do you choose to play coverage? And that gets into a whole different conversation with playing Caleb Williams and his processing and consistency. And he had some plays at family night that just made you want to pull your hair out if you're a Bears fan, as far as throwing off his back foot. A lot of the bad habits that he had at USC and his first year in Chicago. But I think the matchups, the individual matchups, Chicago should feel really good about DJ Moore and Rome Odunze running one-on-one rounds and winning against Miami's corners. If they don't, that'll be a pleasant surprise for Miami. And if the Dolphins don't really pressure Ozzie Trapilo, I will take it as a really disappointing turn of events for the Dolphins edge rush room. Especially because we've heard the drumbeat of how that is kind of the lifeblood of the group. Now, I don't know how much litmus test you're going to get with the running game, where DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, Kyle Monungai, Travis Homer. It's a pretty good running back room, a pretty diverse group of skill sets there. But I would imagine in the team setting, you're going to probably be playing thump. I don't know that you'll be doing full tackle. But I look at this interior trio that Chicago has on their offensive line as well. Joe Thuney, Drew Dahlman, Jonah Jackson. I would expect Zach Sealer to get his. But I'm looking at Kenneth Grant. This is the big Kenneth Grant circle, right? And you can learn some stuff about Jonah Savaianaya based on how Kenneth Grant really pressure and collapse. If he's getting opportunities against Thuney or Jackson, or if they put him over the center and have him rush over Dahlman, what does the push look like? Because I've seen enough of the battles between Grant and Savaianaya to know how Jonah's held his head up above water. So I think you can indirectly get a litmus test on Jonah, and he's going to have his own unique test against Chicago in their defensive front. We'll talk about that just a minute. Versus how Jonah has battled Kenneth Grant by evaluating how Grant tests a very well-schooled, highly compensated trio, right? I mean, these guys are all getting $14+ million a season on the interior offensive line. So great litmus test for your first-round draft choice. Looking forward to it. What about when the Dolphins have the ball? What's that matchup group look like? We're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins, so make sure you guys stick with us. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it just a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or letting a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are always a part of the action. Right now, AFC East odd Dolphins plus 700. if you like it, and maybe it'll shift. Maybe they'll have a really strong preseason. I know USA just put the Dolphins out for their win-loss total at 5 wins. If you feel good about this Dolphins team, you can get great odds on the AFC East if that wets your whistles. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. When the Dolphins have the ball, I look at what Chicago has, and there's some familiar names here, most specifically Tremaine Edmonds, who started his career as a first-round draft choice in Buffalo, is kind of the marquee name for Chicago on the second level. Shamar Turner was a guy that I really gassed up and liked in the pre-draft process for the Dolphins in the midst of their need to rebuild their defensive front. He went to Chicago in the second round. Montez Sweat is the featured player, $98 million contract on the edge room. Man, I really want to see Pat Paul go against Montez Sweat. Sweat's the player that I think has the combination of burst and length that I think could create the best test for Patrick Paul, where Deo Odinyenbo is the other end there, and he's much more of a power style end. I think he has the ability, if he catches you with inside hands, to really collapse you and soften your angle. I'll be interested to see if Pat gets reps against Deo. How does he absorb that power? But Sweat's the one with the length. I don't think he's the most bendy guy. I think Pat's been practicing against more bendy guys with Chop and Jalen. I think Sweat moves a little bit more like a Bradley Chubb. So he's been well-versed in all of these, but Pat getting a new set of ends to attack. And if he goes against anybody that's not Montez Sweat and Deo Odinyenbo, I expect wins, just because Chicago really does not have a great group of depth in their edge rush room. Their third and fourth edges are a couple of fifth-round draft choices in recent years, in Dom Robinson and Austin Booker. Daniel Hardy, Taino Passigno, who's kind of a later stage player out of Villanova, who's most recently in New Orleans. It's Deo and Sweat. And if Pat can collect his fair share of wins, I think you've got length and burst, and then you've got explosive power. Like try to rush you down the middle and take you backwards are the two contrasting styles for Pat to be prepared for. But I don't think either of these two guys threatens Pat in the same way from a burst perspective that Chop Robinson does. So now it's okay. Strike timing against a different set of rushers, making sure you're really sturdy with that inside hand so you don't give anything up inside. That's where I'm looking at Pat Paul against this group that Chicago has. But it's Grady Jarrett is kind of the marquee name up front. And Grady Jarrett at this point is a later stage player, but I think he's a healthy test for either of the guards, with James Daniels, who obviously is recovering from, or is coming back from, I shouldn't say recovering anymore, because he's good. He had his meetings and he has no restrictions at this point as part of a rehab process or weaning back in process. So James Daniels, welcome back from a season-ending injury last year. I don't think anybody on the Dolphins interior has the same twitch that Grady Jarrett does. And I think that's where Jarrett can provide a new test. And that will also be applicable to Jonas Savaianaya, where I think Savaianaya, with Grady Jarrett, I think he has the athleticism, obviously, to match initially. And I have no reason to think that James Daniels at his best won't either. It's just a question of, like, where's your explosiveness at if you're James Daniels coming back from an Achilles injury, right? But for Jonah, it's if you've had some inconsistencies with guys getting into your frame, this is a guy that'll get into your frame really fast. And then if you let him into your chest, then you're going to be playing on the defensive. So I think it's a great measure for both guards. I think the Patrick Paul matchup and the Grady Jarrett versus guards matchup is an outstanding opportunity. Now, in the secondary, they've got a stud player in Jalen Johnson, but Jalen Johnson, he's listed in red on the RLAD's depth chart. So I'm not quite sure what Jalen Johnson's status is off the top of my head. But they've got a wide open battle for corner two. They have Kyler Gordon, who's a really good player, but he's predominantly a nickel. And when he signed his contract extension, they kind of did the song and dance and did the parade that, it's the highest paid nickel in the NFL, right? Like he's a nickel guy. We also don't know what Tyreek Hill's circumstances are. Like, is he going to practice on Friday? I don't know. I would expect, barring Jalen Johnson, the names like Terrell Smith, Za Frazier from UTSA, who I really liked, but was young and raw, Nashawn Wright, Tyreek Stevenson. They got a lot of big, long corners. And they're the kinds that I expect names like Jalen Waddle to really be able to route up. The question of course, is not named Jalen Waddle. Names like Malik Washington, who's not big and not twitched the way that Waddle is. Names like Nick Westbrook-Ikine, who is big, but not short area twitched in the way that Jalen Waddle is, or Tyreek Hill, for that matter. How do those guys handle the area of influence? Because that's where teams have had so much success disrupting Miami's passing offense, has been getting in your face and daring you to win at the line of scrimmage with physicality or with explosiveness to defeat length. And Stevenson, Terrell Smith, Za Frazier, Nashawn Wright, Trey Flowers, all of these guys kind of have that same model to them. And I think that's a great opportunity for the Dolphins receivers, not named Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, to kind of, hey, how do you handle this thing that these guys can present that in some ways has been a root cause of when you get into games and you're playing for keeps, has been a blockade to the offense running efficiently. So that's kind of where I think you do have a good opportunity with the safeties and the games with quarterback, where Kevin Byard, you got a safety when you get into team settings as a guy who's a really instinctive player. He's got great ball skills. How does he hunt in the middle? And Tua, and how he uses his eyes with what's a good linebacker pairing in Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. Excited to see what that looks like as well. Now, I want to finish today not talking about Chicago, but I want to finish today talking about the Dolphins and this road trip that they're on, and why I think it's really valuable for more ways than one. We're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means that fantasy football season is back in full swing this year. Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. Locked On Dolphins is playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your 1 millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team each week is eliminated until there is just one team that is left standing. With the season right around the corner, now is the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you could still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. I wrote this piece this morning for A to Z Sports about the Dolphins. And the title of the story is Dolphins Embracing Unique Opportunity This Month to Help Battle One of Their Most Fatal Flaws from Disappointing 2024 Season. The Dolphins are going to be on the road for 11 days. That was the Jalen Phillips quote. He was asked about this on Tuesday. It's cool team building, team bonding. We're on an 11-night road trip, so we're going to be in the hotel with each other every single day. I think joint practices are a great thing for a lot of reasons. The Dolphins they left yesterday for Chicago. They have practice in Chicago today, joint practice tomorrow. Then they're off on Saturday. Then they have the preseason game on Sunday. And then they go straight to Detroit, where they have off on Monday. They have practice in Detroit, but not with Detroit on Tuesday. And then they have joint practices with Detroit on Wednesday and Thursday. And then they're off on Friday. And then they have the preseason game in Detroit next Saturday. And then they come home. It's a week and a half. It's a lot of time together for a team that has a lot of young players trying to focus on the culture. They made some decisions with personnel to depart from certain players who may have been central themes in buy-in issues last year. The Dolphins team last year was a roster that was comprised of a lot of veterans that were from a lot of different places, and they were playing a lot of essential roles. And as a result, and Louis Riddick talked about this a little bit, when everybody comes from a different place, this is how I did it, and this is how I did it, and this is how I did it. Well, I'm supposed to be this, or I'm supposed to be that. It creates a lot of friction. And that was the quote that really stuck out to me from Teron Armstead, did a live stream earlier in the week, talking about what he saw in his time. He was there for 2 days at Dolphins training camp. And he talked about each of his 3 years in Miami. Here was what he had to say about year 3, which was 2024. My third year in Miami was a roller coaster. It was not a good time. There's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of uncertainty. We had 2 out of the lineup for a long time. We had a lot of confrontation and friction throughout, whether that's just in the locker room or in the building. Not anything that's groundbreaking, but it was enough to not allow the 2024 team to do what we had set out to do. And I've kind of dropped some nugget. I'm not like big insider Kyle or anything like that. I don't really like playing in that sandbox. But some of the stuff you heard in season last year about friction and confrontation and players kind of taking feedback from one another personally, and how the leadership group had to intervene and try to get everybody to get on the same page because you're on the same team. The Dolphins last year, you'd have practices, you'd had training camp, and you know what everybody did? Everybody went home. The Dolphins had a short trip to Tampa, and that was it. A couple of days. They certainly didn't spend anywhere close to this amount of time together. They didn't play back-to-back weeks on the road, preseason, regular season, preseason, and regular season combined until weeks 9 and 10. And obviously, once you're into the regular season, unless it's a West Coast trip like the Dolphins did in 22, well, they were in Buffalo for week 9, and then they were out in LA against the Rams in week 10. They spent the week in between at home, where you'd be at the facility and you do practice and you do your meetings, and then you went home. There's no running and hiding in your hotel room when you guys are all on the road together. And it's a big opportunity for this team, with the focus on relationships and chemistry and being good teammates to one another, to really invest in those opportunities. Tua Tagovailoa talked about it yesterday as well. He said, it's going to be really cool. We have some things lined up with our rookies, and then we have things with the veterans and the rookies and our coaches to go out and find some time to spend with each other, whether that's eating, going and seeing a movie, whatever that looks like. And this is the latest kind of bullet point that falls in line with what my hope has been for this team. I can't guarantee it's going to happen, but the hope is, maybe you're not as talented at the top of the roster. Like, yeah, Jalen Ramsey's gone, right? Like, yeah, Teron Armstead retired. I think Patrick Paul's going to be good. I don't think Patrick Paul's going to be Teron Armstead, but I think he's going to be good. You certainly don't have anybody that's going to be a Jalen Ramsey type of talent on the field. But are you allocating talent, or are you building a team? And if you're actually a team and your teammates are invested in one another, it's a common theme between a lot of successful teams is We play for each other. We care about each other. And the more you reflect and the further you get from 24 and you hear more of the stories, I think the more apparent it becomes you had a bunch of talented individuals playing with one another. Now, there was great relationships individually, but the collective team wasn't where it needed to be. Clearly was not where it needed to be. And I think this year's team has a chance by removing themselves from South Florida and saying, hey, we're here to work. And then when you're done, we're going out to dinner, and then we're going to go to a movie, and then we're going to do this, and then we'll take care of our bodies, and we'll rehab, and we'll do it all again tomorrow. You can't go and run and sit at home away from one another. Hopefully that can spur some more of what you didn't have last year. We'll see, though. And again, this is all things that can happen or could happen or you're trying to accomplish. And whether or not they actually are successful or not, you're not going to know until the team starts to play some games. But it makes this 11-night trip a massive opportunity for the Dolphins to attack one of the things head on that sunk their season last year. That's going to do it for me here today on the show. Hope you guys enjoyed Kyle Krabs. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys for checking out the show. I'll be back again tomorrow reacting to Dolphins joint practice with Chicago. Hope to see you then.